Hi everyone, welcome back to the Active Knowledge series, Transition, Orienteering the Lands of Succession. This is chapter 5. We've done 4 introductory chapters. We're now going to actually step into each one of the lands and do a separate chapter on each land, and maybe some sub-chapters. I think as we get into it, I think the content will break out. So this is chapter 5. It is the land of goals which we're going to step into today and begin to say, what is this about and what work do we need to do here? You'll see coming up on your screen a map, our orienteering map, and you'll see the land of goals sitting there in the top left-hand corner. And we're going to go from goals through into family, through into legacy, up into wealth, into business, and into decisions. That's the journey which we're going to take over these next 6 chapters. As I mentioned, I think we're going to have to, as we get into some areas like family charter, probably create another chapter and dig into that as we go forward, just to make sure you have a proper understanding. But today it is the land of goals. It is the first land we step into, and it sets the foundation. If we don't have a sense of where we're going to, we're realistically just not going to get there. But I'll talk a bit more about the importance of goals as we go forward. For each one of the lands, there's going to be the way we approach each land, maybe a better way to express it. We're going to look at guiding principles. We're going to look at the dangers, and then we're going to come into the base camp. So for each land, what are the principles which are going to guide us through this land? What are the dangers we need to avoid? And now into the base camp, what is the work we need to do and complete before we can exit that land? We'll do this with the land of goals, and then for each other land as we progress, we'll be doing exactly the same thing. When we step into the land of goals, there's basically 2 principles, 1 danger, and the base camp. The base camp we're going to look at last, but I just want to talk about why we're in the land of goals. I mentioned it before. If we don't have a sense of where we're going to, we're not going to get there. But I think it's far more fundamental. The land of goals is about setting objectives and outcomes. Why are we thinking about succession? Why are we going through succession? Where do we want to land? Now, of course, this is not a journey which we take alone. It's a journey which is going to involve a lot of stakeholders, and we'll see that in a minute, the scope of those stakeholders. It's a journey which it's not just, well, this is what I want and let's go. No, it's going to be, this is what I think we should be aiming for. What's everyone else's thoughts? Let's all draw this together. Now let's begin to move forward. We set a purpose. It provides direction and focus. That purpose, those goals will become refined as we move forward. We'll begin to articulate them more clearly. But most importantly, it provides a benchmark. It's going to tell us whether we're on the right track or not. It is the summit we're heading for in crafting this succession process. And as we go through each one of the lands, we're going to pause and we're going to say, what are we thinking about here? What decisions are we thinking of making? Is it aligning with the goals we have set? If it is, tick. If it's not, then what's out of sync? Do we need to revisit our goals? And I would say probably not, usually not. It means we need to think about the way we're addressing the issues in this land, and we need to make sure they are consistent with the goals we're setting. Getting these goals right at the outset becomes quite important, and we need to spend some time there to make sure that's correct. Just kicked up on the screen for you to have a look at. These are some goals which were first established by a medium-sized family business. They refined them and detailed them out a lot more as they went forward, but it'll just give you a sense of where they started from. And you'll see there's 3 columns: goals, compelling reason, result, outcome, sort. The compelling reason we're going to talk about towards the end, but let's just look at the goals. They wanted to appoint a new CEO. Why? There was a sense that we needed to get more energy, new ideas into the business, and that could be a way to do it. And they wanted to have that CEO appointed within a 12-month period. And that's the 12-month period from when the succession plan was ticked off and finalized, basically. Second goal, they wanted to build the profitability and the free cash flow. And they wanted to do this to make sure there is a stable, steady flow of income to the family. This was a first-generation business about to be passed into a second generation, and the family had grown quite significantly. The business needed to not only feed and support itself, but it needed to now begin to grow so it could support a much wider family. A sustainable growth strategy within 2 years. They wanted to, again, within a 2-year period, to have significantly increased the income and the profits they were making and the flow of that money out to the families. Third goal, they wanted to sell off one of their business units. And they wanted to sell that off because they did not believe it was an area they should be in for the longer term. They wanted to exit that, but also it's one which they believe tied up significant capital and they could release that capital. And they wanted to use that capital to repay debt. They wanted to clear out personal debt. They wanted to free up guarantees, and they wanted that sale to be concluded within 3 years. So they had a plan in which they were going to do a lot of work to get that business ready for sale so they could exit from it. And the fourth one they had was about establishing a board of directors and advisory board to bring that new generation of leaders, that new generation of family members, the new CEO, if that was a family member or non-family member hadn't been decided, on board. They wanted to structure a governance process which allowed them to learn how to run that business as a group of directors. And they're going to put an advisory board beside them, far more experienced and seasoned people to guide them in that process. And they wanted that established quite quickly. Appoint a new CEO, build free cash flow, sell off assets no longer relevant, not for the future, and establish a formal board of directors and an advisory board. They were the goals which they crafted as a group in this first land. Behind all of this, sitting at the foundation, there is a core goal, and we'll come to that. But what we need to make sure is that all the goals we set for our individual family, for the businesses we've got, things which are specific to us and our situation, are tying back to the whole core foundational goal for succession, which we've spoken about before, and I'll come to in a minute or so. But I just wanted to give you that snapshot. This is what the set of goals could look like. Principles, dangers, and then into the base camp. Let's start with our principles. What are the guiding principles which we need to acknowledge and just be conscious of as we step into this land? And there's two. Principle 2, Principle 3. Succession is not retirement. Set your goals before commencing the journey. 2 and 3. And if you remember, in chapter 2 of this series, we actually looked at all these principles. You can jump back into that video if you wanted to and just look at these in more detail. But let's just touch on these two. Succession is not retirement. I think this principle is so fundamental to the land of goals. We need to make sure that we actually get it right. And we can just ignore it, we can run across the top of it, and it will come back and continue to cause us problems all the way through as the transition or our succession process. It's about getting your head in the right place, and I don't like to say it that way, but I think it's an easy way to say it. And it's about making sure it's not just us, the incumbent leadership team, but also all of the stakeholder group around us also understand what this transition, this succession process is about. What is it not about? It's not about growing old. It's not about stepping down. It's not about surrendering. It's not about giving up. It's not about saying, I can't contribute anymore. It's got nothing to do with any of that. And if there's any of that language, any of that context is put on the table, push it away, hit it on the head. No, that is not what succession or transition is about. So what is it about? Transition is about the evolution of the business. It's about growth, it's about opportunity, it's about building for the future. It's about the incumbent team grabbing hold of and taking responsibility for future-proofing the business, future-proofing the capital value of the business. It's about bringing in a new team who can take over from them, who are capable, experienced, competent, they work well together. So this is the opportunity to do that. And transition and succession is setting all of that up for the future. Succession is really the starting point of the legacy you leave. It is seeding that. A highly profitable, strong and viable business into the future with a highly competent and experienced leadership team taking it there. Succession is not retirement. It's about you taking what you've got and setting it for the future so it can be released. The second one is, second principle, Principle 3, set your goals. It's the whole purpose of the land. So I'm not going to sort of repeat that, but I just want to say, what is the importance of the goals we set? Well, they provide motivation. They become a lighthouse. They're that summit. They provide a basis for agreement of intent and expectations. Agreement of intent and expectations. Hey everyone, we're doing transition. This is what we are seeking to do. This is what we're seeking to achieve. Let's all understand that. If anyone is not on board with this, speak now, because this is the path we're going to go down, and everything we do has to tie back and reinforce and deliver on these goals. It therefore becomes a benchmark for success. And as I mentioned before, as you go through each one of the lands, you're going to be doing a whole range of work and making various decisions, and as you're going through that, you're going to be saying, is this delivering on our goals or is this not? If it's not, we need to change it and fix that. And I typically find the goals really don't change. They just become more articulate and more clearer. And some sub-steps to allow a goal to be achieved begin to come to the surface. Another important aspect is the goals you set become a focus for your external advisors. Now you can draw them into this goal setting process, or you can share it with them as they become clearer. Different families have different ways of approaching this, depending on the relationships with their advisors. But what you want to do is to make sure all those external advisors, lawyers, accountants, taxation advisors, whoever may be there in that circle which you draw from, that they are conscious that these are the goals you're seeking to achieve, and therefore everything they provide advice on, everything they lean into, is also about achieving these goals. Setting your goals at the commencement, principle 3, is vital to make sure we journey the right way, all the way through. Dangers. Just again coming up on your screen, you'll see the orienteering map, and you'll see sitting right in the middle of the land of goals is that forest and the word lost. The traveller has not sought advice from an experienced guide and has lost their way. This is just a quote from one of the persons, a 36-year-old guy out of US, who responded to and contributed into that succession research project I've spoken about before. This is just quoting. Outside help is surprisingly valuable. My father and I have a great working relationship and a great relationship outside of work. Open communications flow smoothly. I think our situation is one where succession is as simple as it can possibly get. That said, we still needed to bring in a third party to help us get over the hump of transition. It's a pretty simple message, but here you've got a family business where they're saying, we really don't believe we have any issues. There's no barriers which will stop us from doing this well. It's simple, it's easy, it's straightforward. But we found having someone outside our family, outside our group of advisors, an independent succession advisor there, just made life so much easier and clearer for us. The danger is, as you step into the land of goals, that you simply say, let's just do this by ourselves. And there's two key reasons why I would say this could be fatal. One, having someone who is an experienced succession advisor can guide you through the journey of all the things you need to address and tick off and get agreement upon. And during that, they can act as the person who draws consensus and views and builds harmony. That independence becomes quite valuable. But the other aspect, which I think is quite important, is that succession advisor will not only have dealt with many other families and many different businesses and many different cultures and many different views, they'll be able to draw upon the research which has been done around this theme and bring that to the table. Succession's not new. Succession in family businesses is not new. It's been going on for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, and there's some businesses which have been transitioned over that period of time. What you can tap into is lessons learned, the strategies, the dynamics, the barriers, what has everyone else found as they've gone through this journey, and how do we take that on board? Your family, your business, your culture, your background is different to everyone else's, but the journey is the same, and therefore you can learn from that. Your succession advisor, your guide, not only just brings that independence to the table, but they should bring a wealth of knowledge with you as well. Find that guide. If you remember our succession map, just look at it again. Sitting outside all the lands will start here, and again, if you remember the introductory chapters, start here. One of the tasks in that was to find this independent succession advisor and bring them on board before you start the journey. Their degree of involvement, up to you, but you should have that person who you can tap and draw in. That's the danger. Try and do it by yourself, you get lost in the forest, and before you know it, you're overwhelmed. Let's now step into the base camp. The base camp is where we need to bunker down and say, what is the task in this land? How do we get that complete and finished? We know it's pretty simple in one sense. The base camp is for us to develop a set of goals and desired outcomes tailored to us for what we want from the succession process, what is right for our business, what is right for our family, and so we can move forward with that. It will be unique in some ways. It's a control point. This is what we've decided we want to achieve. Are we actually achieving it as we orienteer our way through, or are we lost somewhere? It's just summit, and it's an articulation of that. Let's just remember, simple outcome, we need to have the goals set. But nothing is simple, is it? What's kicking up on the screen now is a list of stakeholders. You don't have to consult with all of them, but these are the people, the groups of people who are going to be impacted by your succession, your transition process. And if you look at it, there's several groups there. There is what I call the family group, yourself, your spouse, your children, your brothers and sisters, grandchildren, cousins, that wider family group. Coming across on the other side then becomes the business side, the management team, other directors who may be there, independent directors also who may be sitting there, shareholders if there's a wider family group in there, advisors, bankers. Then you come down to the base where you've got the fundamentals of the business, my suppliers, my customers and my employees. All of these people, all of these groups of people are going to be impacted by your transition and succession process. As you're preparing your goals, as you're calling those goals together, as you're beginning to write them down, and yes, you do write them down, we just need to think about who within this group should we be speaking to about this? Who do we need to bring on board? Whose opinion do we want to seek to see if they have any great ideas or are on board with what we're proposing to do? Just putting it up there. Some families choose to engage widely, some struggle with that. Your independent succession advisor can be a conduit to help you decide what degree of engagement is best for your succession process. If we step forward into it, I spoke about the cornerstone goal. What is the cornerstone goal? It's the purpose of the process. The process of transition is about enabling the compounding of wealth from generation to generation while ensuring three things: family unity, individual growth, and a sense of contribution. Enabling the compounding of wealth from generation to generation while ensuring family unity, individual growth, and a sense of contribution. As we set our individual goals, they should all be goals which are going to deliver on this cornerstone goal. And I hope that makes sense. Compounding of wealth, generation to generation, family unity, individual growth, sense of contribution sit under and beside our individual goals, and we're going to say, so is this goal going to help us with family unity, or is it going to destroy it? Is the path we're going to set going to allow us to achieve this or not? So let's just look at this cornerstone goal and break it down a little bit more so we understand the importance of it and the reason why we must always reference back to it. One, with the individual goals we're creating now, but two, as we journey forward also. Compounding of wealth. Fundamental goal of transition is to allow us to grow what has already been built. So I'll say that a better way. To allow us to grow on what has already been built. It's the growing and developing existing wealth so as to provide a foundation for future growth and development. We want to compound. We don't want to lose. We want to build upon what's there. How do we ensure that happens? How do we ensure the individual goals we are creating are going to do that? Got the connection now? Generation to generation. We want to create a framework that will ensure wealth passed from one generation to another is preserved and grown. We don't want to find that in the second generation and the third generation the wealth is being diminished and is being lost. How do we create a framework which allows us to underpin the ability of that wealth to be grown? And this is going to come through your family charter, and it's going to come through the governance structure which you create, but it's also going to come through the leadership teams which you build. Family unity. If there's not unity, there will be no future. If the family fights and pulls everything apart, you know the wealth is going to be lost. A cornerstone goal, developing and supporting again a framework of equity and participation that will be the glue which will keep the family together. Again, as we're setting individual goals and we're making decisions as we go forward, we're asking ourselves, is this going to strengthen unity or is it going to weaken unity? We want to make sure it strengthens. individual growth and a sense of contribution, the other two elements. Anyone in the family, anyone involved in the business is going to say, where am I going to grow? Not what's in it for me. Push that to one side. Is there an opportunity for me to grow as an individual? Is there an opportunity for me to participate in a way which allows me to get a sense of pride and purpose? And that's also the second part of that sense of contribution. Am I being asked to contribute? Are you listening to my views? Am I being engaged? Through the succession process, we have to make sure everyone has a sense of contribution, they're being involved, but also we're listening to them as to where they want to fit in and how can they grow individually. And these are elements which underpin family unity. If we step back again, what is that cornerstone goal? Enabling the compounding of wealth from generation to generation while ensuring family unity, individual growth, and a sense of contribution. Again, if you just have a look at the screen, you'll see jumping up there a simple diagram, and you see across the bottom, compounding of wealth, generation to generation, sense of contribution, individual growth, family unity, and the development of the goals. Our initial thoughts, affirmation from the family, the wider stakeholder group, process confirmation as we go through each one of the lands, tick, tick, tick. As we go through each one of the lands, we're affirming that these are the right goals and they are achieving each one of the elements of the cornerstone goal, and then we're actioning it, and we're actioning those goals, the decisions were made in a way which will also strengthen and reinforce that. Just try to keep that connection there. You know, while you create your list of individual goals for your family, for your business, and what you want to achieve, always come back to that cornerstone goal and say, am I going to achieve this? Why? Because the cornerstone goal is drafted, is crafted, so your transition succession process will be successful over many generations. That's why it's important. So let's now step into and just talk about how we actually create the goals. And there's 4 basic questions. And the questions, in one way I say overlap, but they look at the question of what goals are important to us from different perspectives. Coming up on the screen is just a very simple diagram. And you can see it has 4 elements to it: prime driver, 5-year goals, initial outcomes, and legacy. And let's just look at it in this way, the questions we ask. Why are you exploring succession? That's your sort of your prime driver. Why are you exploring this? Then coming out of that, down the bottom, so what outcomes you're expecting to achieve? What do you want to deliver? Okay, then jump across to the side. What about in 5 years' time? Where would you like to be then? Let's just think about that and articulate it a bit more. And before we close this goal setting off, are there any major legacies which are important to you? These 4 prime questions allow you just to begin to craft and to tease out the basic goals. Let's just look at each one of these questions and just see what we're trying to get from them. Why are you considering succession? Question 1. Something has drawn you to this question. Something is teasing out this, I need to have a better understanding of that. And if you can sort of nail that, if you can sort of put that on the table, if you can put some words around that, that typically is your prime driver. And yeah, there's lots of ways you could express it. It could be, my children are just so keen to get into the business, I need to create some space for them. It could be that, look, I need to bring in some new blood. Everything which is happening is just getting past me a bit, and I think bringing someone else in will make it much stronger. It could be, I just want to cash out of the business. It's time to sell and time to move on. It could be that I've had employees working for me for their entire life. I would like to give them a share of this pie as well. And it could be, I don't want to get out of this business. It's a great business, but I need to release the day-to-day responsibilities. I'm just getting too tired and too run down. I need to bring in some help. These can be some of the triggers which allow you to say, I think I need to just think about succession and understand a bit more about what it is. And remember, succession is not retirement. Don't allow that negativity and the elements which go that to tease in there. So question 1, why are you thinking about succession? Can you explain that to me? Jot down your thoughts. Second question, what are you hoping to achieve from the succession process? And let me just explain this a moment. You know, succession, to draw a succession plan, 6 months, 12 months would be a typical time frame if you're well organized. But that's drawing the plan. The actual delivery of the succession process to the end result of what we want to achieve could take 3 years. Depends what we're seeking to do. So just, we're talking about where do you want to be and where do you want to be at the end of the succession process. Again, it's a way of saying what are the outcomes. And I think you express this in different ways. For example, I want to pass the business on to my children. I want a CEO who takes some of the responsibility off my shoulders. I want to reward those people who really helped me make this business what it is. And I just want to get the best price I can from this business because I think I've really worked hard to get it to where it is and it's time to capitalize in it. It's very similar to question 1, but now we're expressing it in a slightly different way. We're now expressing it as outcomes. What are you expecting to have achieved at the end of the succession process? Question 2. Question 3 teases this out a bit further. And remember I said the 4 questions really just begin to step on each other's toes as they go around in the circle. And question 3 is, where do I want to be in, say, 5 years' time? So where do you want to be in 5 years' time? You're now stretching it out past when the whole succession process is now finished. You're asking for a bit more detail. You go, okay, well, I would like to be, in essence, inverted commas, retired, semi-retired. Freedom is mine, I can choose that. But I want to have some capital. How much? If I have $20 million sitting in the bank, that would be great. That's more than enough for all the things I would like to do in the future. What else? Well, I don't want any personal debt. I want all the guarantees cleared. I want the residences cleared. I want the risks which have been associated with running this business cleared off my personal ledger. Okay. What about income? Look, honestly, 400 or 500K a year, pre-tax. I know there's going to be tax on that, but there's lots of things we want to do. I'd like to have a strong cash flow, which I can do that. And a lot of that may well come from the capital which I've got and how I invest that. So, let's not double up on those. What about the business? Do you still want to be in the business? Yeah, look, I don't want to be just kicked out of the business, removed from it. In 5 years' time, I suppose I'd like to be chair, but I'd still like to be involved in the business, not on a day-to-day basis, but coming into board meetings, giving some guidance, just having some ability to speak into. It's my baby. I just want to see. But I don't want to be interfering with the people who are now running the business. I want the children running and owning the business their own right. I suppose that's the other thing I want to be in 5 years' time. Again, you can see question 3 is just teasing it out a bit further. Why are you thinking about succession? What are the outcomes you're hoping to achieve? What about if we stretch that out a bit further than 5 years? Where do you think you should be then? We're now beginning to crystallize the aspirations, the summit we're trying to reach, so we can begin to articulate these now as goals. But there's one more, question 4, which is often not thought about but needs to be thought about. Legacy. Is there a legacy you want to leave? And often the response is, legacy is what you do when you're dead, isn't it? No. Legacy is what you're creating. And one of the greatest legacies you're going to create, in actual fact, is going to be a viable, strong, growing business, which is going to continue forward. But what else could there be? Some people turn around and say, okay, well, if we've got the capital, the local community which I grew up in, they have needs. I would love to be able to build a community centre there and to do something for that community. There's a number of charities which my children have been supported by over the years. I would like to be able to gift a substantial sum into some of these charities. And there's also some medical research which I think is quite important, some other activities which are quite important. I'd like to be able to give some capital into that. So let's articulate that and put that down because it's one of the goals we'd like to achieve through this transition process. So again, we come back to that diagram and you can see the 4 questions sitting around. Why are you exploring the succession process? Question 1, down the bottom. What outcomes are you hoping it will deliver? Across to 3, financial and lifestyle position. Can we draw that out a bit further and understand that? And 4, what are the legacies you may want to leave? This basic information allows you to gain understanding about the goals which are important to you from this transition, this succession process. But again, let's just look at that first set of goals, that sample goals which we put up at the beginning. What did this family come up with? Goal 1, Actually, I want to appoint a new CEO. The business needs more energy and new ideas than I can contribute in today's market to remain competitive. I'd like to have this person appointed within the next 12 months. They've got to have the right character and the right experience to take the business forward. So here's a goal with the succession process. I need to build profitability. I need to generate greater free cash flow. I can't be investing everything back all the time. Family members will require a steady dividend to meet their needs. The kids are growing up, the grandkids are there. This pie, this business which we've created is now feeding a much larger group. We need to strengthen that. We need to see how we're going to grow that. I need a sustainable growth strategy within 2 years that allows a regular dividend to be paid to meet my and my children's financial needs. And you would articulate what that looks like as you go through. The third one, let's sell off this business unit. I would like to do that. It's going to provide the capital for repayment of debt, which is secured over my personal assets. And it's also going to generate some free capital, which we can throw back into the business to achieve some of the growth we want to achieve. So that's going to be good. I'd like that sale finalised, concluded within 3 years. I'd like those personal assets and guarantees which are tied into the business released within a 3-year period. It's a very clear goal for me. And the fourth one, I'd like to establish a formal board of directors and advisory board. This is an opportunity for my children to learn about boards and their role in overseeing the business with an established team. And I also want to have an independent board of advisors there as well to help them guide. When I've been running the business, it's been me. Now the family group's much larger. They're going to have to see how they're going to work together. I want this formal board established quite quickly. I can be chair to start off with, and I want the supporting board, the advisory board in there within 6 months. You can see as you take those 4 questions and you begin to tease them out, how they can be articulated into very clear goals for the transition process. And that becomes quite important. There was one thing I just wanted to touch on this diagram, and you'll see there's a red arrow, compelling reason. If you craft a goal and you can't express why this is something which has to be delivered, why it's so important, and I use the word a compelling reason, then I would say, is it a real goal? Is it something which is so important, so fundamental that we have to deliver it? Because if you can't create that compelling reason, if you can't state that, a couple of things happen. Won't be taken seriously, it's unlikely to be delivered, no one's going to be committed to it, but you're really going to say, but is it a real goal? So that expression of those compelling reasons becomes quite important. I just didn't want to let that slide pass without mentioning it. So in the land of goals, our principles, it's not about retirement. It is about setting goals which will be a benchmark against which everything else will be measured. We will refine them and articulate them further as we go forward with the goals. We're going to make sure we've got some independent advice standing beside us. Someone who's not tied into the family, someone who's not tied into the business, someone who's not tied into what we've done for the last 40 years, but someone who can sit there and can challenge us and can question our intent and our motives and give us some practical advice as to what works, what doesn't work, and call out the risks which we may be facing. So I want that nailed. Going forward, I then really want to set and develop a set of goals which begins to guide us forward. What are we really about in the succession process? And as you know, if you don't nail where you're going to before you start the journey, you're going to do a lot of wandering and a lot of waste of time. So the land of goals is the first land you step into. It is about nailing these goals at a level which allows us to say, we've all agreed, we're all on board. Now let's begin to move through the other lands which are going to help us articulate and tease out all the things we need to do to deliver on these goals. So the journey through family, legacy, wealth, business, and then up to decisions is about going through a journey which is going to allow us to clearly understand what needs to be done to deliver on these goals, but importantly, what needs to be done to what? Allow for a compounding of wealth from generation to generation while ensuring family unity, individual growth, and a sense of contribution. Because when we get to the end and we say, let's now go with this plan, we want to make sure we've set ourselves on a path, a trajectory, which is only going to build what we have built over the last few decades. Land of goals. You can see just coming up on the screen, your checkbox. Before you leave this land, you'll have developed a clear set of goals agreed to by the family and other key stakeholders, and against which you can clearly assess your progress. You write them down, you circulate them, you get everyone to say, yes, agreed, on board, this is what we've decided, and the journey goes forward. Don't allow yourself to pass the land of goals without having settled these, and to make sure everyone understands why you're going in this way. Some people may not be on board, some people may disagree with it, some people may say, oh, okay, but I'm not sure, but at least you've got a destination for your journey, and you can begin to sort out a lot of the challenges or the doubts or fears maybe there as you go through the other lands. But you need to have that sense of a summit, what it is. Land of goals. I hope this chapter has allowed you to just get a better sense of the importance of getting this started and pushing this forward, and you would have found that as you've started into the land of goals, you've jumped into the land of family as well. So the next chapter, chapter 6, is about the land of family, and we're going to dig down into that because that is a critical piece of area which we need to work on. Thank you for your time. Thank you for being here and participating, and I wish you all the best in your succession, your transition journey. Thank you.
Hi everyone, it's Sally here. I work with Richard. You will see coming up on these next 3 slides a URL link to purchase Richard's transition guide, which is a 200-page full-color guide in either spiral-bound printed format or a digital PDF format, or both if you wish, a URL link to the page that contains Richard's blog, a library of over 500 articles on family business succession, business strategy, leadership, growth and competitiveness, which you can access freely. And finally, there is an email address for any questions you may have. These are great resources, and I commend them to you.